Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. I'm your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this latest episode of Good Trouble, the series where I engage in above-the-table conversations that I feel are necessary in the board gaming space in a spirit of education and compassion. This is Real Talk on Racism. This is the third and final part of this mini-series where I attempt to sum up 40-plus episodes throughout the year 2021 of Good Trouble. I have tried to engage and provide something constructive for the hottest topic in our hobby, which is representation. Who is welcome in our hobby? How should we treat one another? And what should our games look like? I want to offer two things with this final video. The first one is I want to bring a little bit more of my psychotherapist background to the conversation. I deal with conflict all day. I deal with conflict between individuals and conflict between groups. And I think the way we currently diagnose the divisions here are a little bit off. We focus on the divisions, on the identity divisions. We focus on left versus right and white versus POC or whatever else is going on. And I truly feel we're missing a piece. We're missing maybe a most important piece, which is underneath all that, reason versus fear. I truly believe that it is fear that amplifies our division, that warps the way we see each other and think about one another and makes it harder for us to talk than it needs to be. The second thing I want to do is be honest. I do have a perspective, a very obvious perspective. I want to see more representation in the hobby. I think we can do a lot better. But when it comes to our division, the way we think about it, a lot of the blame gets placed on our doorstep, our fear, our anger, our supposed hatred. And that has come to be called cancel culture. Cancel culture is a big problem. There is no lack of people who will just go right there when it comes to explaining what's going on. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, it's those cancel culture people that are doing it. They are ruining fun. They're making people feel bad. Innocent people who just want to sit there and game. They are taking things away and forcing changes and forcing a mindset. Everyone has to think a different way because of these cancel culture people. I'm going to be really honest. I'm going to push back against that perspective. That is one small slice of a very large picture and fear is distributed all over the system. There's not only fear on the margins, which is where we are looking in. There's also a fear at the center of the hobby. I don't want to shine a light on that in this episode. That fear I am calling reactionary culture. Reactionary culture sees the calls for change from the margins and says, no! It wants to preserve the status quo and it engages in a backlash, an aggressive defense that wants to keep things the way they are, no changes whatsoever, and it wants to keep things comfortable for those that are already here. Yes, I am going there. I'm going for it in this final video. I know I take on a lot of trouble. This may be an episode where I take on the most trouble of all. So without having to say it, I will say it anyway. Content warning, some difficult language, explicit language, and some uncomfortable themes. But if we're adults, then let's be adults and really talk. This is Shelf Stories. Like, subscribe, spread the word. If you want people, as many people as possible, to engage in this adult conversation, then let's make it happen. All right, so let's jump right in. What is this thing that I'm calling reactionary culture? Over the last year, I've had a chance to participate in a lot of conversations and watch a whole bunch more conversations with folks that I'm talking about. And I've been able to pull a bunch of quotes all along the way from everywhere. BGG, Discord, my YouTube comments and other YouTube comments as well, Facebook and Twitter. I mean, wherever folks are talking about board games. So I'm going to present a bunch of those quotes here throughout this video to illustrate what I mean. Some of them are going to be straight up, but some of them are also going to be kind of altered a bit because at the end of the day, it's not about the people. I don't want to attack any person whatsoever, but I will focus on practices and mindsets. I've said many, many times, perhaps that is the distinction that I can't make all the time, but I'm going to try the best that I can. In terms of one idea, though, that really gets to the beating heart of reactionary culture, I think this quote sums it up really well. The modern board game industry, as we know it, was brought into the limelight by predominantly white men. Women and minorities said, hey, we want to play, so we said, okay, sure, play our games. So at the heart of reactionary culture is a sense of ownership of the gaming space. It's their space, they're in black and white, real talk beyond the platitudes and all the other, oh, I don't see race or whatever it is, right there in black and white. It is predominantly white males who own the gaming space, at least in that mindset. And I almost think of it like they see themselves as defending themselves like against a mugger who's trying to take their money, or against a burglar who's trying to break into their house and kick them out of the house. If you own something and you value it deeply, then you're going to fight to keep it. That's how to understand what is going on and how much friction there is. If, SJW, just like myself, and I have a lot to say about that term in just a second, says boo, then, don't take my stuff. Don't tell me what to do. That is a basic fight or flight response that I believe constitutes the core of reactionary culture. And I say this term, and I don't mean any particular white people. So it's like there's, predominantly white males, but there's a lot of different types of white males. Not like I'm painting y'all with a broad brush. That's something that you're interpreting. That's not what I mean when I talk about that. And so there's a huge spectrum. And so when I talk about reactionary culture, I'm talking about racist. Oh yeah, there's a couple racists in the hobby, more than a couple racists in the hobby. I've actually met some. I've had the displeasure of meeting some over the course of the year in my private DMs or elsewhere, and it's not pleasant, but they're there. But that's not the only thing I'm talking about. There's another level. So there could be folks who have black friends. They're not racist. They'll tell you they don't have a racist bone in their body, or they may not even be white guys at all. They could be other minorities. I've heard from other minorities who are also in reactionary mode mindset because they don't like the libs, snowflakes and libtards, and people who almost like revel in the chances to embarrass us and show that we are actually the ones that are ruining everything. So there's also that type of person in reactionary culture as well. And then there's a whole nother group of people, probably the biggest part of, in terms of what I'm calling reactionary culture as a mindset. I think this is the biggest part of all. And I'll let my friend describe that for you. Quote, and anyone who cries boo or decides to fight back is just called a racist, sexist, etc. White males silently put up with it over the last year in almost every facet of their life, and we've reached a breaking point. It's the moderate white guy! Welcome back, moderate white guy. Over the last 4 videos, I have centered the moderate white guy, and I've not forgotten you throughout this particular video. However, in this space, in the reactionary culture space, we're no longer having a rational discussion anymore. The nice moderate white guy is triggered and defensive, lashing out with that fight or flight instinct because of the perceived threat to something you own. Or in this particular case, it will be something that's valuable to them, their refuge from a terrible world in which they seem to be oppressed by all this quote unquote SJW nonsense. That gaming was supposed to be their haven, and it is no longer their haven, and they don't like it. Let's talk more about that SJW nonsense. Quote, we aren't trying to exclude you or make you feel uncomfortable. We're just asking that you leave all that SJW nonsense at the door when you come to the table for a game night. In other words, shut up and play a game. And speaking of things leaking out into the larger culture, it's shut up and dribble, shut up and work, shut up and learn about 1776. Don't worry about 1619. On and on and on. That is SJW nonsense. But I have talked enough about it. Let me show you what I mean. And it gives me no pleasure to show this video, but I think it's really important anyway to really get a feel for the scope of what we're dealing with here.
Victimizers beware, the racist and bigots' greatest nightmares. Social justice warriors. Get triggered. It's the bias response team. If you've been offended, your feelings must be defended. Go! The freedom of expression is a microaggression. Here comes Angela Freddy. He's always ready to fight fascism with fascism. Starbucks windows don't stand a chance. Ethic enhancer. He's a systematic racism finder. Using the powers of screaming and shame, they win every debate by calling your names. They're heroes who think that they're victims. Social justice warriors.
Now, someone's going to look at that and say, haha, very funny. Jason, learn to take a joke. I still think it is a bunch of whiny bullshit. Through my psychotherapist lens, which is what I'm really looking through, it is shot through with grievance and loss aversion. And it doesn't mean that I'm offended by it. My feelings are fine. I don't want to cancel it. In fact, I played the whole thing on the video in order to try to dialogue with it. At the end of the day, though, my problem is that it is immune to genuine dialogue. A lot of these statements I'm going to show throughout the rest of the video, I can't talk to them. Expression is not the same thing as discussion. And then I'll get the response like, well, I'm trying to discuss, but my comments are being removed. And, there's so many spaces where I feel like I can't freely express myself anymore. So what kind of discussion is that? As someone said, I'll grab a quote from the random place on the internet. The left is paralyzed by groupthink. They ban anyone who thinks differently than they do. I do the best I can to listen. I'm a psychotherapist. Anyone who walks in my office, no matter what they believe, I'm going to try to help. And I run a YouTube comment section that's pretty open, so I do a lot of listening. But I have to say, a lot of what comes in is not very constructive. It seems reasonable, or at least benign, but you look under the surface and you see the fear of change, the anti-dialogue, the 31 flavors of shut up in game, don't change anything. At the end of the day, reactionary culture offers shit and calls it brownies. Reactionary culture is not being banned. It's banning itself. All right, so I know that sounded like a vicious shot just now. It's not. I'm a psychotherapist. My training is in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. My day job, every single day, all day, is to talk to perfectly lovely people about how their dysfunctional, fear-based thought patterns are causing isolation and misery without them even knowing. And I try to help them through as best I can. Change your mind, you can change the world. One of the key concepts that gets applied in CBT is called cognitive distortions. They are pointing out habits of mind like victim mentality, black and white thinking, labels, catastrophization, and many, many more. So many ways in which the brain makes ourselves miserable. And I think of them almost like verbal turds, just sitting in our head, causing all of this stink. And in the trade, we call it stinking thinking. And when it comes to stinking thinking, it causes all sorts of stuff. This is the root of a lot of the depression and anxiety that gets clinically diagnosed and treated in session. So I really think the concept of cognitive distortions applies to the level of community and culture. Let's call them dialogue distortions. They're the same things, the same habits of mind, the same mental turds, only expressed verbally. But instead of causing individual misery and suffering, they cause that on the communal level. They do it in three ways, I think. One, they cause us to exaggerate or just conjure up threats. They stop discussion because they're so closed in by fear and grievance. and they attract and inflame worse behavior down the road. So what's going to follow is my attempt to apply psychoanalytic analysis through the lens of CBT principles to what I'm calling reactionary culture, that aggressive, fear-based resistance to change that I and so many folks on my side encounter so often. That isn't to say I have all the answers. There are plenty of CBT-style analyses of our side, trying to figure out what's going on in our neck of the woods. I'll even link one. This one's called The Coddling of the American Mind. It is from a couple of years ago, looking at what was going on in colleges at the time, and all those kids have grown up and they're causing trouble on Twitter. They're trying to do the same thing that I'm trying to do, but I have my own particular application. I would like to, as I said in the beginning, employ reason to overcome fear. So this video is going to be pretty unique in the sense that I'm going to break it up. So normally a giant video is going to just land them in your face and see what happens. A lot of my videos tend to be kind of like coherent arguments. Here, this video lends itself to having its own spotlight on each topic. I will look at different dialogue distortions. I will look at catastrophization and personalization and black and white thinking and labels. Each one will have their own video. Please, I recommend, if you want to get the whole of the argument, just go to the Shelf Stories playlist of Real Talk and Racism, starting with this one, play all. Bam, done. Or you can take a look at each individual topic, or if there's something either in the title or the description that appeals to you, that sounds interesting, go ahead and take that as its own thing as well. Watch it how you want. I extend the invitation to anybody who wants to on this joyride through the heart of board game discourse about these difficult topics. So if you can change your mind, you can change the world, people. Come with me and enjoy the ride.